This uncle has found a new job in PvE.
7K Dreamer please.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be checking out Galidus in Heavenly Stairs. As you know, he has recently gotten a buff, and this buff is catered for PvE usage. So his PvP skill set basically has not been touched. Remember to like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. So I haven't cleared Heavenly Stairs throughout the whole 2 weeks, and only recently where I finally have the time that I decided to do this. The main changes to Galidus is his bottom skill. So this is an AoE skill, 3-man target, okay? Damage is increased by 600% and also ignores 70% defense. So he hits really hard compared to before for this skill. And also the cooldown in PvE is down to 70 seconds, which is equivalent to Shane's skill. So I think this gives you a very good idea of how, which skill he should be casting frequently. For his Awaken skill, it is also changed. It increases damage by 150% for each empty slot on the enemy team. So if you are facing a single target enemy, this will basically increase by 600%. So he will deal 900% to that single target. And compared to Shane and Vellica, Shane and Vellica do 1000% if I'm not wrong. No, I think Vellica does 1000%, right? So he does slightly less damage than Vellica's single target for sure, but it is still an AoE skill, and a 900% AoE skill is super hard. Okay, for my skill rotations in the earlier floors, I'm basically just casting Espada's top skill, Fenrir's buff, and then I'm gonna just use Galidus to kill off all the enemies. 8 million damage, you can see that. I'm not going for timing here. I know, of course, this is not the most time efficient way to clear the earlier floors. I think some people even clear it within 2 turns. So kudos to those guys. I'm not going for timing here. I'm really just trying to clear the floor. So if you guys are also trying to clear the floors, I think this is a pretty good team. Okay, you don't need to have live streamer school because her buffs are basically kind of compensated with Fenrir. Okay, so if you have Fenrir, that's very good. If you don't have either of them, you can use Galidus, then Espada and Eileen, and then you can also throw in Lina and maybe a taunter like Ares. Okay, that is something I would suggest as well, because as we know, if everything goes well, Ares will be doing the countering, and then this will definitely cool down Galidus' skill to 0. So you can continuously spam his skills. But in this case, I'm not using a taunter, counter taunter, so I cannot do that strategy, which is very common for Shane if you use Ares and Shane or Sig and Shane, right? So it kind of works the same way because Galidus has a very fast cooldown. So his skill set is basically a combination of Shane and Vellica to give you this very strong output damage dealer. And I think he will also be used in a lot of future content like Guild Dungeon as well. So overall, the buff is a very welcome one. He is not nerfed at all, he is buffed. His place in PvP could have fallen quite a bit already because of 5 million, so his survivability is pretty much at stake. So I guess, they gave him a new job here. And he is really doing very well. As you can see, the runs are very fast compared to Shane. Previously, you had to kill 1 target at a time, but now things are just too fast. This also is because the buffs and debuffs, no debuffs though. The buffs for Heavenly Stairs these 2 weeks is catered for you to use him at his maximum potential, because they buff crit rate, lethal rate, I think. So you don't have to worry too much about him not being able to deal damage. The only possibility is that the enemies, block your damage, and that's the only risk there is. But I believe with your guild buffs, which I'll talk about later, your equipment and Fenrir and Eileen, all these together can definitely give Galidus 100% crit and 100% lethal without any issue. So his damage output should be pretty consistent. As you can see, I really don't have anything new for the skill queue, at least for now, because right now the floors, before floor 5, everything is pretty easy. You just have to repeat that same skill rotation and you can get the kill. And I was testing out his top skill in comparison. His top skill really doesn't do that much in Heavenly Stairs at all. So the bottom skill, however, does insane damage and definitely can kill off and erase 3 of the targets. Then again, of course, this is probably because it's still in the 5th floor, so it's not too difficult. After the 5th floor, towards the 7 and 8 onwards, the enemies get a lot more tankier, and it's only then when you need to be using more of his skills, and sometimes the cooldown gets in the way because I don't have a taunter, I don't have a cooldown reducer, so that's the only issue I have. But beyond that, I think he's just way too good right now. Okay, everyone should have him as long as you have been playing the game for a month, because he is free in the jumping check-in, so definitely possible to use him. And also right now there is the web check-in event, the web event, so at the end of 500, I forgot what's that, the carnival thing. Yeah, at the end of 500 of the carnival tokens or something like that, you will get another Gyarados. So it's basically, if you are free to play player, you will get a 42 Gyarados if you're just continuously working on these events. Okay, and I think 42 Gyarados is already pretty decent. I cannot remember what his exclusive items do. I think the 44, at level 44, he only changes formation or something like that, and that does not really affect too much at all, so you don't have to worry about him even being at level 44. But of course the stats involved is the more important thing. So even at floor 6, I think this is floor 6, it is still pretty okay. Yeah, so we're going on to floor 7. So from floor 6 onwards, there are different set of buffs, but still they are positive buffs, they are not anything negative, and the enemies don't have insane, CC status effects buffs as well, so not to worry too much about. The only thing I have about him is that he is a universal hero, so being a universal hero, he will not be going first. So you may have some problems charging his Awakening Gauge ASAP. And if you do get his Awakening Gauge very early, it will definitely help you, because even if there are no empty slots, I think he still does considerable damage. But of course, I think using the first skill, the bottom skill first, to kill off some enemies, and then using the Awaken skill is probably the better play here. Of course, you will want to give him, PvE items, which we'll go through later, and PvE jewels. Basically, I unequipped my Shane and shifted everything over to him, because he should work the same way. The only question I have right now, because Shane doesn't usually use Increased Awakening Gauge Charge Speed Jewel. And as I said, Gyarados is kind of like a Valika and a Shane combined. So that is the only thing I have in mind, whether I should actually use an Increased Awakening Gauge Jewel on him so that he gets his Awaken skill earlier. I think this will only matter towards the higher floors when enemies are a lot more tankier. And I think right now in floor 8, this is when things start to change, because you see that he is not doing as much damage. It's still a lot of damage, but he's not slaying and erasing like he did previously over here anymore. And this is where I feel that his Awaken skill could potentially come in a lot handier. But of course, we must kill off maybe 1 to 2 enemies first, and then buff the damage output from the Awaken skill. Maybe I'm thinking of using Seek as well, because Seek can reset his Awaken skill, and that will be a very good thing. So here is his Awaken skill. As you can see, I hit 5 targets, 3 million. I would say not too bad, but not the best for sure. I'm gonna use his bottom skill, and then we can compare the damage. His bottom skill hits just way too hard. Yeah, that was 3 targets and it already hit almost to 5 million. So you can see that the bottom skill is very good and needs to be constantly used. So sometimes I use Scout's bottom skill to amp his crit damage and crit rate. So these are things that you may forget because turns go by so fast in Heavenly Stats, which is to recast Fenrir's buff if needed to buff your damage output, and also Scout's bottom skill. Eileen here is very good for buff duration reduction as well as with Fenrir. So Fenrir and Eileen can both help in that aspect if you meet any enemies with immortal effects. One thing I will always try to buff first is using Espada's skill to cast the debuff and increase the damage the enemies take. From then on, I think it's really just about using Galida's skill. Block nullification from Fenrir is also very useful in this case. So Fenrir, as we know, is really a very good hero even in PvE, not just in PvP. So hopefully you guys get a Fenrir as well. I don't think his stats need to be very high. I mean, he does need to survive because his 50% lethal increase for all allies is a huge thing. Over here, Callaghan can paralyze. In the event that your team is paralyzed, hopefully you have that healer, like maybe Lina or live streamer Scout, to cleanse it away. Otherwise, you will just get a longer run. And I guess these are things that we don't really take too much notice of for Heavenly Stats. We just go along, right? But they do make a difference, all these resistance traits, and I'm actually pretty happy in a way that they don't require us to keep changing our traits for this mode, because Guild Dungeon is already such a pain, and thankfully they don't have the paralyze or electrify status effect debuff from the enemies anymore. So I think we are on floor 10 now. So even the floor 10 enemies are not too difficult. However, we do have Taka, I believe. So Taka is a DPS. Okay, he can strike down on a single target pretty hard. So that's the only thing you need to look out for, and maybe gear your heroes well enough to deal with him. Beyond that, I don't think there's too much issue, and also of course Platin can convert HP to 1. Fortunately, he doesn't do that here. I think maybe they turned off that effect, I'm not too sure, but I didn't get it, even though it's supposed to be 100%. Yeah, so while waiting for Galida's cooldown, I use Scout's bottom skill to increase my crit rate and crit damage to help with his output. I do realize that Fenrir's top skill also increases crit damage instead of crit rate, so that may be a mistake on my part. I will have to, amend it when I talk about him. But yeah, so Fenrir actually increases crit damage and lethal damage, and not crit rate and lethal damage. So with his Awaken skill and bottom skill ready, I actually prefer to use the bottom skill so that I kill more, and then I use the Awaken skill, as I said earlier, because you want to be dealing the maximum amount of damage possible. So better if you manage to kill some enemies first, and then we'll see how big the Awaken skill does. Not too much as well actually, so you're better off relying on his bottom skill to dish out the most amount of damage possible. And we end off all 10 floors. Of course, this video is pretty much sped up, so it looks like 15 minutes you can clear everything, but it takes a lot longer, like maybe 25 minutes or something like that. Yeah, so these are my masteries. You can actually use crit damage instead, crit rate instead of lethal rate. So it depends on how you your team basically. Because I'm using Fenrir, so lethal rate is not too much of an issue for me anymore, especially with guild buff. 30% guild buff and Fenrir 50%, that's already 80% guild buff. And over here, these are my equipment, and I'm very smart. I actually gave him a PvP item. Okay, so yeah, I realized that only after the entire recording. So you'll see that actually his damage output can be further increased if I gave him the right PvE item. Okay, but over here is basically lethal and crit to balance it out, and then HP, and then standard PvE jewels, PvE attack, crit damage, lethal damage, and skill cooldown. For his accessory, I've given him Willful Ring and the Celestial accessory that deals increased damage on offensive and magic enemies. For his traits, you don't have to worry. I'm not sure why I have death debuff on him, because he provides death immunity, so that is something you will just have to remove it as my bad. And I also gave him increased damage on offensive and universal enemies on his fighter's soul. Next up we have Eileen, double HP and defensive jewels. She also has a Gallidus Might involved, so this helps to reduce buff duration even more, especially against immortal enemies. And basically that's all. She doesn't die too easily as long as you have good gear. Okay, good HP armor on her. PvE HP armor is best. Next up we have Fenrir. Fenrir is purely still in his PvP build, so as you can see, even though he has his PvP build, he doesn't die too easily. Maybe the enemies are also not too strong. So this is something that you don't have to worry too much about. Just give him whatever you have for your PvP team. Just use him anywhere else. I think he doesn't die too easily in PvE though. And then we have Live Streamer Scoot. I've given her double HP and defensive jewels, as well as a evasion ring as a substat. The evasion is very good in Heavenly Stairs, even though it's just 14%, but it's still better than nothing. And sometimes you can avoid attacks completely, and this was especially useful when I was using it on Ares. So I decided that might as well give my support line the evasion ring. And if you don't have Live Streamer Scope, you can use Lina instead, because Lina provides the same kind of buff, also heals and cleanses, and in fact Lina's buff is a lot longer than Live Streamer Scope. Finally, for Espada, double HP, which I want to Myth Awaken at some point in time, and then also an evasion ring, as well as defensive jewels, PvE defense, and status effect resist rate if possible. You again don't need the death debuff. I only used the death debuff previously when the enemies actually have a lot of death casting. So basically that's all I have for this video. Let me know what you think of Gallidus after the remake, and whether you are using him in Heavenly Stairs and how he does. Stay tuned for more guys. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much, and see you!